Where on earth did it all go wrong for the Jacksonville Jaguars? We'll go through it. You might get surprised about what I say. Listen to this on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. Appreciate you listening and watching us wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you tap in every single day so you do not miss an episode. Today's episode of Locked On Jaguars is sponsored by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code all lowercase Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Once again, shout out to the everydayers for joining us every single day. And now, if you're here for the first time, you're going to hear why they come back every single day. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to land the plane talking about what now. Try to offer a few solutions to the 2-9 Jacksonville Jaguars who are on a bye week this week while we anticipate and wait for or continue to speculate about whether Shad Khan is going to make changes and when he's going to make those changes and what changes he'll make. Right in the middle, we'll find those mistakes. We won't cherry pick. What we'll do is we'll say, what if Trent Baalke and Doug Pederson did have a chance to be successful? Take a look back at some of the small blunders, not cherry picking, but taking a look at the small blunders that kept them from actually getting over the hump this year. We'll discuss that. But we're going to start at the top, in the beginning. Sounds like I'm writing an epic book that's going to last for centuries when I say stuff like in the beginning. And it feels like the misery that the Jaguars are going through has happened for centuries to fans of this team. It hasn't. They've only been here for 30 years, man. It ain't been, well, yeah, it has been kind of bad because the last, I got 30-year-old kids and they haven't seen consistent effort from the Jacksonville Jaguars. But on a serious note, I'm going to start here, but I'm not going to take a victory lap because that's not what today's show is. In the beginning, and we're talking about 2020, I wanted the Jacksonville Jaguars to start off with a clean slate. That would mean nothing from prior to 2020. In fact, let's go with 2021. 2020 is the year that they start deconstructing everything. I know that for a fact. I know they weren't adding anything. They were looking towards the future. They needed a quarterback. I get it. I know exactly what they were doing when they did all of that stuff, okay? And I'm talking about the Urban Meyer situation, all of those things that happened back at that period and that point in time. It's hard to do it and try to do it retrospectively when you think about not bashing Trent Baalke and not bashing Doug Pederson to the point of, all right, man, look, don't kick them when they're down, right? So we're going to start in 2021. They hired Trent Baalke. I thought it was a mistake. Most folks thought that they were going to get new blood in here with the coach and in Byron Leftwich, and he's going to have his own GM, all of that. Nobody knows if that will work because I think Adrian Wilson, who everybody thought was going to be the GM, I don't think he is a GM anywhere. In fact, I know he isn't. And Byron Leftwich isn't even coaching in the NFL. So it doesn't mean that the alternative would have worked. I'm just talking specifically about what they did here. I didn't want them to have Trent Baalke to have anything to do with the franchise, but they did. So once they did that, we were hopeful. And then they hired Doug Pederson, who won a Super Bowl. This is very, very important for everyone to hear. We were hopeful that Trent Baalke, who had led his team to 2 NFC championships as the GM and a Super Bowl, and they were on the 4-yard line with a chance to beat the Baltimore Ravens when he was with the 49ers. And then we know how they broke up, right? We know how those teams, he got away from there, and there was this big issue with Jim Harbaugh. And then when Harbaugh left, well, the franchise went down under Baalke, and the proof was in the pudding that, well, maybe they got rid of the wrong people, or maybe Trent Baalke wasn't the one who was responsible for that team winning because, well, they couldn't win without the coach. who's now winning again at another team in the NFL and who won a championship in college. Doug Pederson. We were hoping that we thought Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie were crazy. How you fire a coach that won a Super Bowl 3 years ago when that city had never won anything? Even with Andy Reid, his mentor, Doug Pederson's mentor, as the coach, they fired him too. And then he went on to go and be one of the greatest coaches ever. And he's won 3 Super Bowls since he left. We were hoping that, well, we want the part, we were hoping Philly was wrong. The problem is, I think Doug Pederson thought Philly was wrong. And I think Trent Baalke thought the 49ers were wrong, because what we ended up getting both of those guys doing and saying the same thing that they did when they were at those other spots and they got ran off. How do I know that? Because fans from those teams, and not just fans, but media members, people that I've discussed this with, have told me it literally is a playbook from when they were here before. Both of those guys I thought would learn, or I was hoping what they had done was learned from those situations. It now seems like what both guys did was they felt like they were done bad in their previous spot. They didn't learn anything, nothing changed, and both of them are doing the exact same thing that they did somewhere else. But now the difference is they're both doing it together, as opposed to Trent Baalke being with Harbaugh and Howie Roseman being with Doug Pederson. So their situations, there was a dissolution of their past situation. And it's like, okay, whose fault was it? It's almost as like two people were in 2 separate marriages and both marriages failed. And then they both bumped into each other and blamed their exes. And then 3 years later, they're getting divorced again, and it's dysfunctional. Maybe the problem wasn't them. Maybe the problem is you, and was you, and it's still you. And now you got 2 disasters hanging out together, trying to make it work. What are they trying to make work? They're trying to make an organization that also had previously never worked and had been dysfunctional. It turns out that it's a perfect storm of a disaster. That's what this is. This doesn't mean that people aren't good people. This doesn't mean that they don't work hard, right? That's like a player that runs fast, but he's going the wrong way. Yeah, you hustling, but it's even worse now because you went to the wrong place and you got there real quick. Now you got to go further to get back to where you're supposed to be. So this isn't character assassination. This isn't cherry picking, because I've made mistakes. Hell, I wanted them to take Thibodeau or Evan Neal the year they took Trayvon Walker. Everybody knows that. I ain't going to sit here and lie. But it's the failure to admit you were wrong. And it's the failure to learn, and it's the failure to change, I believe, that has led the Jaguars to this situation, which is why I want Shad Khan to do something he's never done. And that is start completely over. Let's discuss it. Let's give the benefit of the doubt to both Doug and Trent. And I'll tell you at the top of segment 2 why I want to do that, just for the sake of this discussion. Even though I don't believe it, I believe it was a disaster from the beginning. I'm being very, very transparent about that. But what if it wasn't? They were 9-8 2 straight years. They were in a very competitive playoff game. They won a playoff game, and it was in another competitive playoff game with the Chiefs. I don't think it was by accident, and I don't think it was, what do they call it? I don't think it was money that you really didn't have. I do think they didn't capitalize on it. I don't think you can win that amount of games in a row, come back from 27-0 down, and compete with the Super Bowl champion if there wasn't something there. It wasn't luck. You don't get lucky like that in the NFL, because people are actually out here punching you in your face and having a car accident 60 times a game. And you do that over and over and over and over again. You can't call it luck. You can't call it fool's gold. That doesn't work in the NFL. One game, maybe. A drive, maybe. Half a season, 9-8 or 10-8, 10-9, win a playoff game, compete with the Super Bowl champion on the road. No, that does not happen by accident. It's a game of inches. And I'll tell you a few times where they made the wrong decision in their process. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Prize Picks. That's right, man. Prize Picks, the #1 daily fantasy empire of sports site in America. And you can get involved too. All you got to do is download the app today and use the code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Jamar Chase is going to go for more than 79 yards because he's been doing it all year, right? Travis Kelce, he might not get 60 yards if everyone plays him like the Bills did. You got to figure out whether it's more than or less than the player stat projections, and then you can win some money too. Now, just remember, download the app today and use your code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Get paid even if your team is bad, man. Make you some money, and you can do that over at Prize Picks. Make sure you go over to Prize Picks and download that. Get going today. It is all about Prize Picks, man. Prize Picks, run your game. Today's show is also sponsored and brought to you by Pre-Alcohol by Z-Biotics. Going on vacation? If you need to make sure you are straight, then Pre-Alcohol is what it is, because Pre-Alcohol Biotic Drink by Z-Biotics is the first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel better tomorrow. Here's the process. Drink pre-alcohol first. Drink responsibly after that, and then enjoy tomorrow. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On NFL at checkout. Z-Biotics is back with 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% discount. All right, running it down here on Locked On Jaguars, telling you about what I think the issues have been in the missteps and where they went. All right, let's just say Trent Baalke and Doug Pederson as a combination were good enough for the Jaguars to compete and win for a championship and to be relevant and to be one of the best teams in the league, to have a nice sustained run at least through most of Trevor's career. Let's just assume that. And let's just assume that they had bad luck or maybe a misstep here or there or something they could have done a little bit differently. This is going to hurt. This is going to hurt a lot. The Jaguars should not have drafted Travis Etienne in the first round of the 2021 draft. That's the first thing I'm going to tell you right now. Trevor Lawrence was fine. They should not have drafted Travis Etienne. I don't know who they should have drafted, but it should have been somebody in the trenches. You don't take a running back in the first round when you are in the situation that they're in. And this doesn't mean that Travis Etienne is a bad player. Travis Etienne could very well benefit from a change of scenery similar to what Saquon Barkley has done. I'm not telling you he's as good as Saquon Barkley is. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is you put him on the right team in the right situation, and this doesn't look this way, because coming into this season, he was expected to have 1,700 yards, and he was expected to do that for a reason, because there had been enough that you had seen from him to know that he's explosive, he's fast, which is why he was drafted in the first place, because the Jaguars were a slow team. I think Jacksonville screwed up. They should have gone heavy in the trenches and done something that would have helped this franchise for 10, 12 years. Just off of a whim, if you ask, like, what wig, who's available, it's hard to say. There are a lot of people that were available. All right. So I'll go through it a little bit. But like I said, I don't want this to turn into just flat out cherry picking about one position when, like, there's a dude right behind him that's like really, really good or something like that. I think that's a little bit lazy to do that. And I do believe that it isn't quite fair when you look back at it. However, I will ask you this. How good would they have been had they had Javon Holland? How good would they have been, or better had they been had they had Landon Dickerson? How good or better would they have they been if they had Christian Barmore, Trayvon Merrick? They took Walker Little, who they probably shouldn't have drafted either unless they give him an extension at 45. They're really, really, really good players. Sam Cosmi just got a contract extension. He got picked about 6 picks beyond or past Walker Little. He's a very, very good player. It's just so many examples. The Jaguars tight end coach at the time had coached at Penn State, and Pat Fryermuth, who's also gotten an extension, was also picked after both of those guys. The Jaguars, in fact, they picked Tyson Campbell at the top of the second round. So we're going through 3 different spots here. They also could have stayed up and maybe moved up a little bit and ended up with somebody like Christian Darrisaw at 23 when they took ETN at 25. And we don't even go back to the year prior to that when they picked C.J. Henderson and Kayvon Chason and Justin Jefferson was on the board. Because sometimes when you do that, what happens is the player that they would have taken or the route they could have gone probably wouldn't have led them to be back at the top of the draft. So it's hard to really, really do that. But I think that's a mistake. I think more recently, a mistake was if you're going to pay Eric Armstrong the kind of money that they were paying him to be a backup edge, why didn't you just go after Dorrance Armstrong, who's not starting in Washington, who played in Dallas? Why didn't you do it? Another mistake is misdiagnosing what the problems were at the end of the 2023 season and firing the defensive coaching staff. As a whole, if there's 1 or 2 people you want to get rid of, fine. But when you fire everybody and you bring a whole new staff in, and then the new staff makes your team actually worse, then that kind of tells you that you made a mistake. A lot of times, at that point, a lot of people probably thought that was the right move. I wasn't necessarily against it. I was against like wholesale changes, but I kind of knew, because the way I felt about Trent, that things weren't really going to change. Sometimes change is good, even if it's temporary, because it makes everyone go, ooh, all of our jobs are on the line. And that's fine, but that's short-lived. It still goes back to me trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, because even though people in the building, I even knew a couple of guys on that coaching staff, they're still guarded and protected when they talk to you, because they're sitting here thinking like, nah, dog, we got a job to do. They're not going to tell you until they leave, okay, what was really going on, because it's counterintuitive to them trying to make sure they know what the deal is every day. And then they don't do that finger pointing thing behind the scenes. But some of the guys that told me, nah, everything's fine, man, we just got to do this, that was their optimism speaking. But what it really was, when it was over with, they told me that the problem for the team was still in the building, that it wasn't them. And they weren't trying to be self-serving, because those dudes still have a job. In fact, they have a thread. I'm going to be honest with you. All those dudes that got fired have a thread, and every now and then they holler at each other and be like, ooh. That's why I said I wonder what Deshae Townsend did the other day. He probably gave them a death stare after that 52-6 whooping that Detroit put on Jacksonville. And Deshae Townsend, you got fired here as a defensive back coach, as if like you ain't good enough to be here as a DB coach, but you're good enough to be with Detroit, while their DBs are playing lights out and dudes are tackling people all over the place. One of the biggest mistakes I think they made was letting go of Juwan Taylor. Now, you can tell me, well, he ain't that good. Yeah, but neither of the people that they have replacing him. I mean, when you think about, you just listen, just hear me out. You take Gabe Davis's money and probably Darnell Savage's money and maybe one of, I know if you take Eric Armstead's money, you could afford to keep Juwan Taylor here. And if you keep Juwan Taylor here, that means that money could have been used on him, and then the money you used to replace him or give Cam Robinson, you could have let him go a year early. See how you let Taylor go, and then a year later you let Juwan go, when you could have just let Juwan go, kept Taylor, moved Anton Harrison over to left tackle. It's just too many things to point out and too many mistakes. Giving Gabe Davis that money was a mistake. It was a mistake. Darnell Savage was a mistake. The people in Green Bay told me that. I said, what is it? They said, we still don't know. You're going to be trying to figure it out. And I'm trying to figure out what does he really bring to this team? How is he better than Rayshawn Jenkins? Drafting 2 linebackers in the first 3 rounds after you signed Foye Oluokun was a waste of money. And trading up for Devin Lloyd and then still doubling back and taking Chad Muma. Y'all ain't good enough to be doing stuff like that. There was a total lack of investment in the thing that should have been invested the most. When you see the president, you see Secret Service. When you see Trevor, you see bodyguards that aren't up to par. You see the other quarterbacks around the league, their bodyguards look like special forces guys. The Jags bodyguards look like some dudes from your neighborhood that knew how to fight. That's it. They didn't protect their biggest asset, which is Trevor Lawrence. All of these things make the Jaguars just look like an unserious organization. So it goes back to the very beginning. They should have never hired Doug, and they should have never hired Trent, who hired Doug in the first place. What now? Don't make the same mistakes. I said Doug Pederson, who sounds just like Doug Pederson sounded in Philly, according to the media in Philadelphia, and Trent Baalke, who acts and sounds just like Trent, who was in San Francisco, that they didn't learn anything. You know who needs to learn something? Shad Khan. And that's what we're going to get to next with What Now? We'll talk about that in the third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Hillsdale College. Hillsdale College is where you can get some knowledge, man, and learn more. It's never too late to learn at all. Hillsdale College, man, is offering free classes. That's right. Offering more than 40 free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, introduction to free market economics, the Great American Story, a Land of Hope, and the rise and fall of the Roman Republic. All of Hillsdale courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. HILLSDALE.edu/lockedon. Hillsdale edu/lockedon. Segment number 3 here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. In the beginning, we talked about them hiring that I thought it was a mistake who they hired, but let's get past it. We gave them the benefit of the doubt. I was hopeful and optimistic that it'll work. I said maybe those guys won't do what they did before. They'll learn something. Didn't happen. Finding the mistakes, I named a couple of big ones. But those weren't the only things that they did. It was more than that, but really what it serves is some of the small things, very small things that when you add them up, they become a really, really big thing, right? Organizationally. And I always said that it was a team building issue. Now, what do we do? I had to take a deep breath and get myself together here, because this is a conversation that it seems like over the last 13 years or so that we have constantly had over and over again when it comes to this team. What do they do now? Shad Khan has to learn from his mistakes. I remember when he hired Urban Meyer, he said, I think I got it right. Did he say that? Did he say that with Urban, or was that with Doug? You see, that's the confusing part of it, because those two press conferences were within one calendar year. I understood the Urban Meyer thing as much as a lot of other people didn't, because they don't like him. There's a lot of coaches that have not been liked, but that dude did have a track record of winning. The part of Urban that was not so good were things that you heard about how he treated people, how he treated coaches. I heard that about winning coaches before also. The bad thing about Urban in college was he was responsible for young men. You get them when they're 18, you lose them when they're 22. They're very impressionable. And people at that time, for the most part, are generally very, you're under a microscope when you're dealing with young people, because they're impressionable and you're the adult and they're the young adult. Well, in the NFL, I didn't think that was going to be a big problem for Urban Meyer, because, well, he's a grown man with mortgages now. And the league is the czar. The league determines the punishment and so on and so forth. You don't have to do much of that to punish them by sticking them on the bench. And then you found out about him kicking people and talking bad about people. And then all of a sudden, Shad realized it wasn't going to work. And then he left. And then they kept Trent, and then they hired Doug Pederson. Nicer guy, better person, better result. But eventually it fizzed out just like it did before. Are you going to continue to do the same thing and expect a different result if you're Shad Khan? I hope not. Start fresh, start over. If you're going to, I'm telling you, man, whoever you go out and get now can't be any worse than what it is now. This is about as bad a feeling. 2020 and now are about as bad of feelings as you'll ever have in any franchise. Apathy is really kicked in now, and people don't think that this thing is going to work. In fact, I did a podcast yesterday, and I said, hey, man, everybody just keeps saying to me, it ain't going to matter if we leave it up to Shad to pick who the GM is going to be. Well, who else is going to pick the GM? The guy that owns the team, he ain't going to let nobody else pick it. I mean, he might do a search committee, but ultimately it's still going to be his responsibility if he moves forward. They have to get someone with fresh ideas. They have to hire a general manager that everyone thinks or believes and has a track record and has gone through and really learned. And it doesn't mean the team that's winning the most right now, because that's a mistake sometimes too. Remember when they hired Dave Caldwell, he had come from Atlanta, and Atlanta had made a big run under Tom Dimitroff, and they had Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan as the OC. They had Dan Quinn as the head coach. So you think Quinn, Shanahan, that's a pretty good combination of coaching there, right? And then Dimitroff was the hot guy, so we go get his next guy, and that was Dave Caldwell. And Caldwell admits that he was young. I don't think you should have a first-time GM with a first-time owner with a first-time head coach. I don't think you should have a owner that's inexperienced and doesn't have a track record of building a culture with a coach like Doug Pederson that was questioned about his culture and his decisions to hire staff. And then Trent Baalke, who had big questions about his ability to have a team and have people view him in reverence and really galvanize a team and have people ready to run through a brick wall for him. It's just that you hired stubborn, and absent. Now they have to hire people that are accountability, people that eat, sleep, and drink football, that know how to build a culture. The culture is built because they can convince people to do anything. They have guys wanting to show up to work, wanting to learn, wanting to be eager to get better. Football playing Jessies. And sometimes you have to do that with infrastructure first. That's fine with me, because that will be interior defensive line and offensive line. It's fine with me because it's going to be a center fielder at safety that has a high IQ. It's fine with me because that means you're going to get a tight end that'll do the dirty work as well as catch passes, and he'll be one person, not two or three, taking up roster spots. That's fine with me because you don't need just to get a running back because he's fast. You're going to get a running back because he's a real good football player. You might have him on the roster in Tank Bigsby already. It's fine with me if they go the infrastructure approach because they have a quarterback, they have an alpha receiver, they have two real good pass rushers, they have a good solid corner in Tyson Campbell, they have a Mike linebacker, right? And they at least have one guy is a really good tackle prospect who's young that a coach can come in here and teach how to play. It's fine with me if they just go blue-collar GM, coach that doesn't have a whole bunch of that's not one of these, I call them fighter pilots, that's throwing the ball all around and running all of this pretty offense that makes you feel good but doesn't mean anything. Let me give you an example of that. I'm not getting on my soapbox about boxing, but I'm a boxing purist. So the Jake Paul Tyson fight did all of these numbers. Great. It's a success. There's a buildup, costed, it made a whole bunch of people want to go out to Dallas and watch it. And it was all over the TV and it was an event. And I watched it because I'm a cultural critic. But from a boxing standpoint, it was boring and dull. And the result wasn't what I wanted. What saved it were the two boxing matches, the real boxing matches that were in the preliminaries that made it an enjoyable night. But people will still say they won't watch boxing. And what they'll do is they'll watch another exhibition by Jake Paul. So what really did you enjoy? Did you enjoy the buildup? Did you enjoy looking back at the numbers and saying, yeah, but they set records and the numbers and everybody got $60 million? How does that help you? You know the part that helps you? You know the most enjoyable thing was those real boxing matches, and you probably don't even know those folks' names. Stop falling in love with hype and fall in love with results. Stop falling in love with stuff that's going to make you excited and happy, but at the end of the day, won't mean anything more than a 2-9 football team. Get the infrastructure right. If you build it properly, you ain't got to touch it again other than a little bit of maintenance. And that's what this organization needs. They need this thing right, even if it's not exciting. They need it right from the bottom, from the inside out, from the top, from the bottom, the inside out, a total move towards accountability for the rest. Well, for the future. That's just going to be who we are. Win, lose, or we're going to play with integrity. And we're going to have people here that want to play. And I tell you, man, even if you're 8-9 or 9-8, if you know you're going to that stadium and those dudes are giving everything that they have, and those coaches are coaching their butts off, and they're fighting every single week, that is what leads you to building the DNA and the foundation of a team that's going to make it. I just described the Detroit Lions. They didn't win those first 2 years, but they kept going. Jaguars were in the playoffs after 2021 when those two teams were side by side. Being early doesn't mean you're going to be there all day. It just means you got there before anybody else. And now you're not there, and Detroit might run the whole thing because they did it right. Shad Khan, you have a chance to do it right. All you got to do is do it. All you got to do is tune in here on Locked On Jaguars. The Jaguars have a bye week, but I'll continue to dissect and go through all of the things that plague the team and try to provide you hope and optimism for everything moving forward. Make sure you tap in every single day here on Locked On Jaguars. Also, catch me on Locked On NFL. The show comes on twice a day. Tyler rolling early in the morning, hit you across your face like a double shot of espresso, and then you can slide on into the barbershop with me. Make sure you go on over to Locked On NFL, wherever you get your podcast, and check me out. All right, man. Take care. You guys take care of each other. I'll do the same. See y'all tomorrow here on Locked On Jaguars.